Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be tearing the top half of the motor down. As I said in a previous video, I've got Edelbrock aluminum heads, Edelbrock Performer intake, and a Holley Sniper EFI fuel injection unit to put on my motor. So the first thing we have to do is tear everything back off of it, clear down to the block. And as always, the first thing you want to do is disconnect your battery so you don't short anything out. You're going to be unplugging some wires and stuff here. The next step I did, which I did some things already because they're kind of boring and don't really need to put on video, but I drained the coolant out of the radiator in the block. I pulled my spark plugs out. I took my bottom bolts off my exhaust manifolds so I can unbolt them from the side of the head and pull the manifolds up out of our way to get them out of the way. So the next step I'm going to do now is I'm going to pull the carburetor off. Then I'll probably do the intake and then the heads last. When I pull the carburetor off, I'll have to pull the distributor out of the intake first so we can get the intake off and get the intake off. And I'll take the valve covers off, pull the rocker arms and the push rods out. Let's take the exhaust manifolds off and then bolt the heads and get them off of there. So okay, we're going to pull the distributor out now. And the one thing I want to double check when I pull the heads off is that I'm at top dead center with the timing mark. So what I did, I'll show you over here on the other side here. I've got the engine cranked over. I don't know if you can see it down in there. You can see the line on the harmonic balancer is at 0 on the timing tab. So that means, according to that, this number one piston should be at top dead center right now. And then if you see where I've got the distributor, see how it's facing? It's facing towards number one cylinder. So in theory, right now, if I pull this head off, the piston should be at the very top of the stroke, with this pointed at that direction with the timing mark on 0. That's top dead center for number one cylinder. And that's the way I timed it. So my main concern is because this motor's been apart, it's got a different cam in it. There's some question about the timing marks on the cam, and I'm going to get into that a little bit later. But I was just assuming that mark on top dead center on my harmonic balancer was top dead center. Now it could be off a little bit depending on the whole motor and everything. So what I want to do is when I pull the heads off, if that's not a top dead center with that timing mark, I need to make the engine top dead center at the compression stroke for the number one cylinder and then remark my harmonic balancer to what 0 would be at that point. Or mark it in such a way so I know where 0 is on it. So when I go to do my timing, I've got a correct mark to go off of for my timing. And that's very important. So that's one other thing I'm going to check while I got this all apart. Because it's still, this motor, it had a bad miss in it till I reset the timing with the timing chain because it was off a tooth. But I just want to make sure, before I put this all back together, it still doesn't, I got to pull the timing chain out or something. I want to make sure while I got it tore down this far that this thing is correct when I put it back together. I don't want to have to do this again. It's very time consuming. There's a lot involved. You know, you got to dispose of your coolant, buy new coolant, all kinds of stuff, gaskets and everything. So you don't want to do this too many times. You can help it. So anyway, let's go ahead and get the distributor pulled out, and then the next thing we'll do, we'll get the intake taken off. Okay, and that actually came off easier than they normally would because I just had this off recently. It didn't act like it was sealing very good though. It looks to me like my intakes were still maybe leaking past a little bit. Okay, so now you can see down into the rocker valley. I spilled a little bit of coolant down there. I got to wipe that out. That came when I pulled the intake off, so I'm going to daub that out and get all that moisture out of there. You can see a few drops up here too, but overall it looks pretty good. So my next thing I want to do is I want to pull the valve covers off. Okay, so the next thing to do is I want to take all the rocker arms out and then all the push rods. I've got new push rods to go in this motor. According to the instructions, I need push rods that are 100 thousandths longer than the old ones, which are 1/8 of an inch longer. And once I pull these out, I'm going to double check that and see if there is a difference in them and make sure it is 100 thousandths if there is a difference. Since I'm going with new push rods and I'm going to have new valves, it really doesn't matter where I put these rocker arms back. If you're rebuilding this engine, you want to put it back, you want to make sure you put each rocker arm back where it came out. But in this instance, I don't think it's going to make any difference. Everything's going to be new, it's going to be touching, so I don't think it matters where it goes. I'll look and see as I take them off, see if there is anything weird about any of them, but I'm just going to take them off and I'll put them back on wherever, because on this engine I don't think it's going to matter. Okay, I'm just pulling one push rod out for now. I'm going to measure it and then compare it to one of the new ones and see if it is 100 thousandths difference. Okay, so I'm going to check the push rods and see if they're the same length or if they are a little bit longer. But I want to show you some of the parts I ordered in. Besides the initial parts I showed in my last video, I also ordered the push rods, spark plugs, and intake bolts. Let's see if you can see. There is the part number for the intake bolts, or ARP. That's for a small block Chevy intake. The spark plugs ordered that they recommended is this one here. It's a Champion. It's an RC12YC. And if you look at it compared to the plug that came out, you can see how much longer the threads are on this one. And that's because the threads are that much deeper and the aluminum head to give more strength, so when you screw it in you got more threads so you don't strip them out as easily. If you had it just that short, as soon as you tighten it down, you probably strip it out very easily. So the overall length of the plug is basically the same. The amount the plug enters the cylinder should be about the same. So the only difference is the threads come up higher. You can see on the body of the plug. Well, it'd help if I'd show it, right? I'm looking at my plug and not looking at my viewfinder. So anyway, you can see the difference in the plug length. So it's just screwing in the head further. It's really not going inside the combustion chamber any further because they're just adding that on behind it, and the head comes up that much higher with the threads. So anyway, make sure you get the right plugs with your heads, whether they're cast iron or aluminum, whatever you're doing, make sure you get the right plugs. Now, these are the push rods I got. You can see they're 9629, they're Edelbrock, and this is what they look like. This is my old one, and this is my new one. And if you, I'll try to do this where I can show this in the viewfinder where it'll show up. Basically, I have one end, the other end of these are flush with each other. And you can see the black one, the new one is, it looks to me like about 100 thousandths longer. So that's what they said I needed, and that's what it looks like it is. So make sure if you're doing any new heads or anything, make sure that you get the parts you need. Something I was noticing on this, and I don't know how well this will show up, but look at the end of that thing. It's kind of boogered up. I'm kind of curious. I laid those rocker arms in a box in a certain order, so I'm hoping I can figure out which one this one was, because I want to look. I don't know if that was down against the lifter or that end was against the rocker arm, but that kind of concerns me a little bit. The other end looks pretty good, so might be a good thing I'm changing these anyway. So anyway, I'll get those all pulled out of the engine and we'll start taking the heads off. Okay, here's the rocker arm that push rod was hitting against, and it looks brand new, so I think I'm going to be okay. It just might have been a weak spot on that rocker arm. So, okay, so the first thing I need to do is get the bracket off here for this AC compressor. And there we go. One down. And unfortunately, I think this was the easy one. And you're going to have to kind of forgive me a little bit on this. I'm struggling a little bit because I'm having problems with my right shoulder. So I don't have much strength in it. So I got to kind of muddle through with this. I'm just going to go ahead and break them all loose now, and I'll take my cordless drill and back them all out. Break them loose already? The back one wasn't very tight. They're supposed to be torqued, at least with aluminum heads, they get torqued to 65 foot-pounds, but that doesn't feel very tight at all on these bottom bolts. I don't think that's much more than 30 foot-pounds or so. It's not taking much to break them loose, and normally it's a little harder to break them loose than it is to torque them down. So I don't know, that kind of worries me a little bit. A little more to break loose. Yeah, that didn't take much to break them loose. It sure didn't feel like no 65 foot-pounds. Whoa. Don't want it to fall down. Okay. Let's get it on. There it goes. Getting a lot of oil in that cylinder, that cylinder, that cylinder. For my valve stem seals leaking, I believe, is what was causing it. I hope that's what was causing it, because we'll eliminate that now. I'm still not overly impressed with the job this guy did on my engine for me. I don't know. Let me show you what I'm looking at here. This cylinder's got a weird groove. I can actually feel it through these rubber gloves. If you can see it down about that far, goes around. I don't know what that's from, but that's not good. The rest of the cylinders look okay from what I can see. But that definitely, I don't like that. Okay, so I've got the engine all tore down as far as I need to go. Just a quick overview of it. If you can see on the head surfaces, they look like they were sealing good. This one I'm kind of questionable about. This bolt here was barely finger tight, and this one wasn't much better. And I had a couple other ones down here on the bottom that had hardly no pressure to break them loose, so that kind of concerns me a little bit. I don't think it was causing any kind of leakage issue, but as you can see, I don't know if you can tell by these pistons, they look kind of oily and wet. Several of them are that way. on both sides. And I want to show you the heads now. And I'm not sure how well this will show up, but I'm going to run this light down inside of there. Okay, this is the driver's side, and this would be cylinder number 7. And you can see down in there, see that valve? See how oily it is and how wet it looks down in that intake? It is serious oil leakage past that valve stem seal. Same way on the number 5 cylinder. Look at the top of that valve. It's just covered with burnt oil. The cylinder's soaking wet with oil. You come down here to number 3 cylinder. Same way. Look at that. Just full of oil, and even the number 1 cylinder. Okay, that's on the driver's side head. On the passenger side head, you come in here. Okay, that's cylinder number 8. Again, the same way. You can see how wet and oily it is. Number 6, full of oil. It's the number 2 cylinder. And the number 1 cylinder. Okay, that's on the intake. So I had pretty much every one of the intakes were leaking. Okay, this is the driver's head. Again, this is the number 1 cylinder. If you look down in there, it's pretty dry, but you can still see some carbon buildup and stuff, so it is getting some oil past that seal on that one. This one looks really good. That's what it should look like. I don't know if that light's too bright, but you can kind of see down in there. I'm trying to get it without blinding you. You can see how dry that valve guide is, and it's white. This one, you can see it's black and all crusty looking. And in the port, you can kind of see it's oil, burnt oil. And the same way on the number 7 cylinder. You can see all that buildup on that valve guide. That means oil's getting past the valve guide seal here in the upper part of the valve. And it shouldn't be doing that, not on a brand new rebuilt engine. This side's not too bad. That's the number 2 cylinder, number 4 cylinder. Trying to get some light in there. Now I was getting some on the number 6 cylinder. You can see it's got some crust built up on it like that. And the same way on the number 8 is getting some oil and build up in there. So let's see, it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Out of eight intake valves, 6 of them were leaking. On the exhaust, all 8 were leaking oil. And that's totally unacceptable on a brand new engine. I'm sorry, but there's no excuse for that. He put brand new seals in, and for whatever reason, either they popped off the stems because he didn't install them correctly, or I'm not sure I can even see a seal in there. Yeah, it's got a seal down on there, but for some reason it's not sealing. That was one of the main reasons I wanted to go with new heads, because I knew I had an issue here and I didn't want to spend much time replacing all these seals and have it still be bad. Plus the valves are all crusty and everything. This way I started with brand new heads, brand new intake, brand new fuel. Things should run like a brand new car. And after I got the engine tore down to this point, I discovered some issues with the block, and I was a little concerned about that. And there were some issues when I was taking the heads off. Some of the head bolts, I mean, they weren't tight at all. They might have been, I don't know, maybe 30 foot-pounds or something. I mean, they weren't tight at all. And that kind of concerned me. Now, there was no indication the head gaskets were leaking that I could tell. I haven't really looked at that close yet. But that concerns me, you know. If those were not tightened all the way, what else in this engine is not tightened all the way or tightened properly? So I'm a little concerned about the rod bolts, if they're torqued correctly. And then the other thing I found on at least one of the cylinders, some of the cylinders I haven't looked at because of the position of the pistons, and just this one cylinder was enough to concern me a little bit, but I'll try to show you. I don't know how much it was going to show up in this video, but if you look down in that cylinder, you can kind of see, maybe, let me turn the light down a little bit here, see if this helps. you can kind of see some roughness down in there, and see that dark spot over here. That's actually indentation in the cylinder. You can feel it with your finger. Now, I don't think it would catch a ring or anything, but my concern is if, you know, oil will leak past that as the piston goes up and down, and compression and everything the first split second. I mean, the overall scheme of the thing, does it really affect it? I'd say no. And possibly, would it ever affect it? I'd say no. I don't think it'd get any worse than it is now, but it's definitely not going to get any better. And I don't know if you can see over on this side, it looks a lot worse over there. So, and again, this is one of these deals where I didn't put the engine back together, and I really regret it. I know I've talked about this in previous videos, and I don't fault the engine builder for that in the cylinder. That was in there when he got the engine, and I told him, I said, well, check it out, see if it needs anything, and you know, deglaze the cylinders with a hone and just put new rings in it, use the same pistons over again, because basically it didn't appear to be any wear in the cylinders. I mean, if you look at the rest of these, they look really good, really nice and smooth. You can see the cross hatch from him honing it. I think overall the block's not bad, and he did what he could do with it without boring it out, because this block, it's a 350, it should be a 4-inch bore, and it's already been bored out 60 over. That's the maximum amount you can go on this block, and you can't go any more. So basically, if there's a damage to the cylinder, you got to throw the block away and start over. So I didn't want to have to do that, and I told him to try to save if he could, and I think in his professional opinion that those grooves wouldn't hurt anything, and I kind of believe him, or tend to feel, you know, that he's correct. But I have had the worst luck with this engine since I started, and I'm just to the point, you know, I just spent over $3,000 for new aluminum heads, a new intake, and Holley Sniper fuel injection. And I hate to put $3,000 on top of this motor and always be wondering what the rest of it looks like. I was looking at two options: either buying a new short block and putting my aluminum heads and stuff on the short block, pulling this engine out, putting the new one in, or just cleaning this one up, putting it back together, and just cross my fingers hoping the bottom half of this motor will last as long as I need it to last. I was just at the point, I talked to Diane about it, and you know, she says, well, I know how picky you are, and you're not gonna be happy. I'm always wondering about this motor, and I'm just tired of spending money on the car. And I just told her, I said, you know what, I'm just gonna put it back together. And she says, no. She said, go ahead and order a short block. She says, because I know you, and you will not be happy with this engine. So that's what I did. So yesterday I called a company out of South Carolina. I'm not going to mention her name or anything in this video. I'm going to wait until I get the engine and look at it and see if it's as good as what it looks like it should be, and as good as this company is, their reputation. So I don't want to do anything until I get that and can confirm it, and then I will promote them. When I go up, I'm actually going to go up and pick up the engine in South Carolina. And when I do, I'm going to talk to him and see if I can shoot a video. If I can, that's great. If not, I'll just talk about them if that's okay with them. So anyway, what I'm going to do is I ordered the engine yesterday. It's just going to be a stock 350 4-bolt main. It's going to have some performance parts in it, just not to increase the horsepower or anything, but to make it a little bit beefier motor and a little bit more dependable motor and tougher motor in case I do decide to do anything more with it. So basically what I'm going to do is I'll go pick it up. They said it'd be ready in about 4 weeks, hopefully. Because originally on their website it said 6 to 12 weeks to get a motor, so we'll see. They said because I'm going with a short block and this particular motor, they can maybe work it in a lot quicker. They're hoping anyway. They're hoping less than 4 weeks. So I'm waiting to get a confirmation email back from them today, and then I will touch base with them in a couple weeks, see how it's going and so forth. And as soon as we can, we'll get it and start installing it. So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about. And then the other thing I want to talk to you about too, on my head, I talked about this the other day, how wet these runners are on the intakes. And I got to looking at these surfaces and the surfaces of the heads where these make contact, and also the gasket. And to me, it looks like, even though I put new Felpro gaskets, intake gaskets in this engine because the old ones that he put in were leaking, it still, to me, appears like they were still sucking oil up through these areas here on the bottom between the head and the block, you know, on the intake. It was sucking oil up from the rocker valley into the intakes, and I think that's why these look so wet. I don't think it's all because of the valve stem seals. I do think some of it is the valve stem seals because the way the oil's built up on the stems of the valves, but I think the majority of what you're seeing here is just because it was sucking oil in here. So that kind of concerns me too, that on this engine, I don't know if it's been decked and they decked it, they didn't keep the same angle, or they decked the heads and it changed the angle of these surfaces a little bit to where they won't seal up now with a good Felpro gasket. And that kind of worried me too, sticking with this engine and put my new heads on there and stuff, if I'd have the same issue with my intake leaking. So I really think Diane's right. I won't be happy with this, and the best thing to do is go with a new short block. And so that's what we're going to do. So have a great day, and we'll see you on the next video.